Good afternoon from Castle Goring, from Mickey, Aurora, and from me. Well, we have some very entertaining, rather delicious shades of Schadenfreude news today, but we also have rather more serious matters. So without further ado, I am going to plunge right in, if Aurora will let me. The big news has not come via a question, it's come via a friend who rang me up and gave me some delicious news from LA and New York. And I checked it out with another friend. And sure enough, Mickey, Aurora, come and console Marty. Meghan and Harry are in big trouble with Netflix and Penguin. Can you believe it? They are in big trouble with Netflix and with Penguin. I mean, the things I was told that were said about them. Oh dear, oh dear. So I actually made notes, and I am going to read them out instead of trust to memory. Now, the first thing is, this has nothing to do with Spotify. It's totally Netflix with elements of Penguin. I am told that the powers that be at Netflix especially, but at Penguin also, are absolutely spitting bricks that Harry and Meghan left early, and that they threw their stroppy fits and did not avail themselves of the invitations which would have given Netflix in particular content. Because even though it became very apparent very quickly that the way things had been structured, Meghan and Harry were not going to be able to milk the Jubilee celebrations to their advantage. Just by going to events, they could have cut and spliced and got footage. Content is the word that was used. Well, they don't have any content because the two babies threw a tantrum and threw out the bathwater and all their toys at the same time. Poor Megxie and H. It's so sad. Well, I was told they should have attended the events, even if they were not in pole position. Ultimately, it would have made no difference. They could have cut and spliced. This way, however, Netflix and Penguin can work its way around it a bit better, but not that effectively, because they do not have the material to play with. And, sorry, Aurora is chewing something she's not supposed to chew. Sorry. There we go, baby. You come to your mutty. They should have attended the party in the park and the Jubilee parade. They didn't do any of that. What did they do? They got on a plane while the Jubilee parade was taking place. Evidently, without consulting anybody, and to the fury of their corporate bosses. And let's make no mistake about it. They, in their folie de grandeur, may think that they don't have bosses, but they do. There's an old adage, he who pays the piper calls the tune. Well, I was told How true it is, I don't know, but I think it has the ring of truth. That they regard them as turkeys. Which rather leads me to think, well, why don't they just gussy them up and serve them for Thanksgiving dinner? Anyway, they are evidently regarded as arrogant, impetuous, self-willed, wastes of time and space, I was told. In fact, I was actually told that in an ideal world, they would have extended their stay. Harry only had one commitment, which was to play polo the following week. He lost the match. He wasn't necessary. Nacho Figueras would have been able to replace him, and I'm sure would have been perfectly happy to replace him had it been imperative for Harry and Meghan's best commercial interests to stay. They could have stayed. They knew, and Netflix knew, and Penguin knew, that there was no prospect of any of the royals attending Lilibet's first birthday party, because everybody's diary was full and had been filled 6 months beforehand, which Harry knows, Meghan knows, everybody knew. So the cover story that, oh, well, we're so upset nobody came to Lilibet's party except the Tyndall children, who evidently didn't. So it is whispered that they didn't, that there were no royals at the party whatsoever. And even if there had been the Tyndall children, it's crazy. They could have had a party the following week when everybody's diary was freer. They could have stayed. And evidently Netflix at a corporate level is considering their options. They're considering their options. And I was told that the shocking waste of money has not gone down well. Meghan and her Dior couture dress, well, suit really, because it was a coat with something underneath it, so it's really a suit. That plane, all a shocking waste of money. And it doesn't matter whose pocket the money's coming out of. People at a corporate level don't like to see waste. And they evidently have accused them of being wastrels. Aurora, come and console Marty. Come on, Marty needs consolation, baby girl, yes. Marty's grief-stricken on behalf of Megsy baby and H. Those poor, sweet, wonderful, loving eco-warriors, one private jet flight at a time. Those brave figures of compassion, one act of treachery at a time, one act of familial disservice at a time. I need consolation, baby. Art student says, Lady C, I see that the historian A.N. Wilson has slated the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge's joint portrait. I am an art student and rather like it. I know you studied art too. What is your opinion? Well, that's a good, nice, light question before we get into the heavy stuff. Because really, we would like to have a balance between levity and gravity. So, or I should say gravitas. Well, The portrait was painted by Jamie Corriff. It's their first official joint portrait. I noticed that Anne Wilson, who is a historian and actually something of a friend of a great, great friend of mine, and somebody I have some respect for in terms of the content of some of what he says historically, he was billed by the Mail as a respected art critic. I'm tripping over the word because it's so farcical to call him a respected art critic. Is he Teddy Lucy Smith? I don't think so. I mean, he may be a respected historian. I do not recall that he has a great art collection, or that he studied art, or that he has ever been an art critic. However, he opines. I suppose they couldn't get an art critic to say what they wanted him to say, so they got him to say it. He said that pretty much that it's a dire portrait, that it makes Catherine, who's full of life, look lifeless. Well, with due respect, Mr. Wilson, you're speaking through the orifice upon which I am sitting. It actually, and I now say this as somebody who studied art for 11 years, went to an art college, collects pictures, and lives surrounded by art, some good, some great, some decorative. But I do know the difference between a good picture and a not so good picture and a bad picture. And I am afraid I couldn't agree less with Mr. Wilson. It is a very fine portrait. It is in the finest tradition of classical portraiture. It is very polished, and Mr. Wilson is confusing polish for dullness, and the two things cannot be confused. And because the portrait is polished fully to the nth degree, and I'm saying artistic polish, not veneer polish, he thinks it's lifeless. Well, it's not lifeless. He only needs to go to the Raphael exhibition that's on at the National Gallery at the moment to see that you can be full of life and actually be polished at the same time. And in my opinion, Jamie Corriff's picture is a very fine portrait. It captures their likenesses perfectly. More importantly, it captures their personalities. Now, one of my oldest and closest friends had a son who possibly could have married Pippa. So I have an inside track on what those Middleton girls are like and have been since before the marriages. In my opinion, Jamie Corriff captures both their personalities perfectly. It is full of life. It is full of passion and emotion. It conveys her gentleness. It conveys her liveliness. It conveys her intelligence. It also conveys her exactitude, her punctiliousness, and her simplicity. And it captures William in all his complexity brilliantly. So, now on to rather more contentious matters. Adelaide Leslie says they could sue the jewellery company that used the picture to hawk their finger ring, which she was wearing. Must have been arranged, otherwise how did they know she was wearing such a ring? Adelaide Leslie, that's a very good point. I'm sure we all know who the they that they're speaking about in the picture. You know, the one that was put up on that hawking website where Meghan's wares are flogged and everything is given a price because, of course, Meghan knows the price of everything even if she doesn't know the value of anything. And so do her cohorts. And it's a very good point. Since the ring wasn't visible, how, unless Meghan and her people conveyed the information, has it been posted? Very good point. That's the beauty of this sort of situation, because we have conversations and information going back and forth and sharing information. Now that's a detail I would never have picked up, and thanks for it. Sheila Powers says, hello Lady C and your entire family. Does that include cousins? Because I have a vast family, many of whom I've never met. You have created a wonderful life for yourself and all of those around you. Well, that's very kind of you. I'm not sure everybody would agree, but hopefully many will. You have turned your life into a banquet and you are seated at the head of the table. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, I'm not going to disagree. But I'm going to say thank you, thank you, thank you. What are your thoughts on the California doctor who is said to have attended Meghan at the delivery of Lilibet? I understand she is suddenly retiring from a lucrative practice with very little notice. Hoping you enjoyed the Jubilee and wondering why the Queen didn't instruct everyone approached by Meghan to say, how is your father? Oh dear, well, I don't think anybody needed to instruct Megsy Baby on anything because Megsy Baby knows it all, and she certainly knows better than that broken down old 96-year-old woman who's just the Queen of England and thinks that she owns the word royal when she doesn't. No, she doesn't. Oh dear, Dr. Melissa Drake, flourishing practice, the peak of her profession, announces that as of the 30th of June, she's taking a leave of absence to concentrate on her family. I think that's what politicians usually say when they're caught with their trousers down, that they're going to resign to concentrate on their family. Well, maybe she's going to concentrate on her family. Maybe. But let's take it at face value. To throw in a career that you are a specialist in at the peak of your career takes some doing, doesn't it? You need to have a strong incentive to do so. Well, what is really interesting about Dr. Melissa Drake is that not only does she have a flourishing practice, and that evidently her clients, her patients, I should say, who are still with her and were expecting her to see them through to fruition, shall we say, are now stuck without a doctor, which is not a pretty thing for a woman to have to endure. But her husband, Dr. Daniel Reichlich, is a specialist in the freezing of eggs, in vitro fertilization, egg donation, and embryo transfer. So, Meghan has been in very good and practiced hands, hasn't she? Certainly, Lilibet was delivered by very good and practiced hands, without any of the tiresome mucking around that took place in Britain. Because, of course, things are far more straightforward in California, in fact, in the United States generally, than they are in Britain. But I don't think we should read more into it than possibly caution dictates. Because they could be getting a divorce. She could be having a nervous breakdown. She could just want a change of pace. She could be one of those women who strives to achieves, and then decides, oh, well, I'm going to chuck it in at the height of my career. I'm going to do a Garbo. Why not leave at the peak? I mean, it's happened. Garbo did it. I can't think of many other people who did, but maybe Melissa Drake is one of them. But I think it's a space that we should watch, because isn't it interesting that somehow anybody connected to Harry and Meghan, somehow things don't quite go the way they would have been expected to go? A couple that is not only full of surprises, but somehow entangles itself with people who are equally full of surprises. However, I wish Dr. Melissa Drake well. And I am sure you do as well. Trish Plank says, this is just my opinion, but I think Meghan allows the rumours to be addressed so that if they are untrue, she can continue to play the victim. See, everyone has been so cruel and hateful to me, and I haven't done anything wrong. The longer she can keep the mystique of her children's gestational headquarters, the longer she can play her best role. Victim! Exclamation mark. You know she loves it. Yes, she does. Megsy Baby seems to have the sort of personality that requires sympathy and attention. It's a pity that these are traits that are shared with narcissists and sociopaths. Not saying that she's necessarily one or the other. Of course not. Not even hinting. Whatever the reality of the situation, the fact of the matter is, it should not have arisen. It should not have been allowed to arisen. It should not have been allowed to develop the way it developed. It shouldn't have developed the way it developed. And these are two distinct things in case I need to make the point. She has placed everybody in the most invidious position, her children as well, herself as well. What are her motives? Well, we can speculate till the cows come home. And we can look at all sorts of irregular photographs and note that Meghan has the unique distinction of carrying her baby in her breastbone, then in her belly and between her knees, or so it would appear by the photographs. These could be distinctions that a woman of her distinction and of her splendiferous possibilities she can have given birth to these wonderful accomplishments that are unique to her and available to no other carrier of a baby, because she is unique, she is special, she is. You don't need to take my word for it. Ask her. Well, whatever the reason, whatever the reality, the fact of the matter is this is a situation that is unacceptable and should be cleared up forthwith. And if it's all about attention, my goodness, Mickey, get my address book. I want to phone Nurse Ratchet. I think we definitely need Nurse Ratchet. We for R1. Whatever. Oh, yes. I have chosen on this topic names that are not readily identifiable, because this is now a serious time, and I do not necessarily agree with some of the views that are being propounded. So, I understand and empathise with the people of York and Sussex not wanting Prince Andrew and Prince Harry bearing titles representing their counties / cities. However, I find it rich that a Labour MP raises a question against the royals' titles when I didn't notice a massive protest from Labour against Tony Blair, the war criminal, being awarded the highest honour in the land when he was knighted. Well, this one I definitely agree with, because in my view, Tony Blair and George W. Bush are guilty of war crimes and not unique in thinking that. Many very, very centrist and right-wing people, as well as left-wing people, think that the war in Iraq was a disgrace that should never have happened. And yes, isn't it so odd, shall we say, that Rachel Maskell can wade in trying to get an Act of Parliament passed on the subject of royal titles, but neither she nor anybody else in the Labour Party objected to Tony Blair being knighted or made a Knight of the Garter. Do we have a whiff of hypocrisy here? Can it have wafted over from Montecito to York? I'm beginning to think it's not only pigs that fly and private jets, but hypocrisy. Blingfire says, if people want Andrew out, he should be out. If the royal family had handled their business responsibly and decently, it would never have come to this. If they get lucky enough that it doesn't pass, they should wake up and take care of business, otherwise it's only a matter of time. It really annoys me that people not letting certain of the royals make a mockery of their position is somehow being painted as not supporting the royals, because that is not what it is. People are sending a message that they would prefer to support the royal family, but not while they are arrogantly acting like a bunch of entitled, disrespectful buffoons. Well, Blingfire, I have chosen this as representative, and because you don't have an identifiable name, because I think there are several issues here. I get your basic point, which is that the royal family, to be respected, needs to behave respectfully and respectably. I wouldn't argue with that. What I would argue with is the fact that the rule of law and democracy and civil liberties are not jokes to be bandied about on soapboxes by people who somehow don't seem to understand that when you are intolerant of other people's rights today and expect powers to be given to strip people you don't like of their rights, maybe tomorrow or day after tomorrow, but certainly at some point, it's going to become your turn to be stripped of your rights and your entitlement. First of all, adult life is not a school, and this is not a schoolyard. And adults don't have to behave at all times in a way that everybody finds acceptable. If they did, we would be living in a terrorist state, terrorized by dictators. The mere fact that we don't, that we can disagree with people and that people can behave like buffoons, is actually a good thing. It's a positive. It's called freedom. It's called civil liberties. It's called civilization. It's called tolerance. The reality is, Rachel Maskell's bill is a total misuse of Parliament. And I hope by the time you have heard me through, you will see where I'm coming from and possibly see the light as well. Because it's very easy to cast stones and to make aspersions about people. And quite frankly, sometimes it's fun. A lot of people entertain themselves with righteous indignation, with being unkind about people, with being bitchy. That's valid. That is a valid way of entertaining yourself, as long as you do not then expect your preferences and prejudices to be enacted into law to muzzle, silence, deprive others of their rights, including to make buffoons of themselves. For what it's worth, Parliament makes laws. It does not implement them. The bill is fine to the extent that it gives the right to the Queen to withdraw a title. And I'm not arguing with that, because the monarch is the fount of all honours. And the fact that she can create a peer but not strip him of the peerage is actually possibly anomalous. So I have nothing against that aspect of the bill. However, if a committee in Parliament has that right, Parliament is then usurping the role of the courts, and it is converting itself from a legislative chamber into a chamber of trial. That's what courts are for. That's what courts are for. Parliament is not a court of law. Parliament is not supposed to be listening to the public and passing laws that allows itself to function as a court of law, which is what this bill would give Parliament the right to do if it is passed and a committee in Parliament has the right to strip anybody of a title. I want to make that people seem to misunderstand that the 1917 Act that rescinded the titles, the royal titles of various royal dukes, was at the behest of the king at a time of war when British royal dukes were fighting on the enemy side. I don't recall Andrew having fought on the enemy side. I don't recall Andrew having committed an act of treason, which is what you can regard fighting on the enemy side when you are a peer of the realm as being. It is totally undemocratic, unparliamentary, and akin to a kangaroo court in a totalitarian state to have Parliament pass a law that allows it to pass judgment on anybody under any circumstances. Since when did people not understand that you need in a democracy to have checks and balances, and that only the naive or the stupid or the thoughtless actually think that government is necessarily benevolent? Governments are fundamentally not only there to protect our interests, but for us to guard against them abusing our interests. Civil liberties have been fought for over the generations to turn our world from a world where a few people had all the power and all the rights into a society where everybody has some rights and they are encrypted in the law. Now you're trying to suggest that it is all right for a Labour politician, and I don't give a damn if she's Labour, Conservative or whatever, she's totally out of order because she is trying to not only undermine the purpose of Parliament, but to abuse the power and to abuse the limits that Parliament has, as should every organisation that rules over people. Everybody should understand that it is in all our interests that each organisation has a limit to its power, and you do not expand the power of Parliament so it now becomes a court of law as well. You know, civil liberties don't just apply to you and to those you like. Civil liberties apply to everybody, including those we dislike. Think about it. What makes this society worth living in is the fact that you can write what you have written. You can have your opinion. I can argue with you about it. We disagree, but you have your opinion and I have mine. What you are proposing is what Harry and Meghan are proposing. Shut down all avenues of disagreement. Punish everybody who doesn't agree with you. Well, the last time Britain indulged in civil restrictiveness of the kind that this bill will be introducing through the back door, and make no mistake about this, if this bill passes, it is going to be disastrous for the long-term interests of civil liberties in this country, because it is usurping the territory of the courts. The last time that happened, in the fulsome way that an awful lot of people nowadays would like it to happen again, was under the Protectorate during the reign of Oliver Cromwell. The Protectorate was 1649 to 1660. Oliver Cromwell, if I remember correctly, died in 1659, and his son Richard took over for a bit of a year. And people were so fed up with the Puritans, because Oliver Cromwell was a Puritan. And may I make the point as well that Puritanism is at the basis of a lot of woke culture. We are righteous. If you don't agree with us, you deserve to be punished. Witch hunts, witches being drowned, and if they died, they were innocent, and if they lived, they were guilty and had to be executed. I mean, excuse me, do we really want to end up in a world that abolishes Christmas again, which is what happened under Oliver Cromwell? Why do you think Charles II was brought back to reign over this nation? Because people understood jollity requires a degree of freedom, which means that people disagree with each other. They disapprove of each other. I do things you don't like. You do things I don't like. It's your right, as long as you don't commit a crime. That's what the law is there for. I mean, I'm actually smitten to think that this situation is arising and that people actually don't see the danger that we as a society are placing ourselves in if we go along with the neo-Puritans. Because make no mistake about it, these are neo-Puritans. They want to strip everybody who is unpopular of their rights. Then there are going to be new people who need to be stripped of their rights. you better be careful. Neither Andrew nor Harry has been charged with or convicted of any crime. I was asked last year to do my petition via Parliament, and I refused because I saw the danger, and the danger existed then and it exists now. Parliament has no business in determining the fate of somebody who has not committed a serious crime. And indeed, it depends not only on the severity of the crime, but the crime needs to be so gross that the person is attainted. Lord Kagan went to prison. Lord Archer went to prison. They didn't lose their titles. Why should they lose their titles? They went to prison. They were convicted of a crime. Yes, maybe they should have lost their seat in Parliament, but not their titles. Why should they lose their titles? In a civilized society, you commit a crime, you pay the price, the slate is clean, you get another chance. Only in an uncivilized society with brutal people who don't understand that their brutality is ultimately going to destroy their lives as well as everybody else's, should somebody have 2 punishments for one offence. Prince Andrew has committed no crime, nor has Prince Harry. I mean, Prince Harry has committed many an offence, but has he been charged with a crime? No. If he is charged with a crime and found guilty, then he can be attainted. Between now and then, absolutely not. That's why I did my petition in the way I did it, that it is a voluntary thing emanating from him. Nobody has a right to strip him of his title as things stand, and as things should always stand. I mean, it's, since when was unpopularity a good enough reason to strip people of their rights? Think about that for a second. Demonizing people, then using the law to strip them of their rights is what the Nazis did. It's what the Soviets did. It's what the Red Chinese did. Do you really want to live in a world that's going to do that? Because this is what you have asked for. You need to be careful in life what you ask for, because you might get it. Depriving people of their entitlement is an abuse of power. Nobody has the right to abuse anybody else's power or to have their rights abused by other people's power. Britain is a great parliamentary nation. We have exported parliamentarianism all over the world. That and the English language are possibly our 2 greatest gifts to humanity. We are now going to allow our parliament to abuse its power and its citizens. I mean, What world do you want? Think about it. You know, we can't allow our passions to pervert the purpose of Parliament and the law, which is the rule of law, which is the proper administration and passage of rules to make society better for everybody to live in, including those we don't like and don't agree with. Anything else is totally unacceptable. It is the slippery slope to what happened in Nazi Germany, and don't think it won't happen here, because it will, if things like this are allowed to pass into law. I'm going to remind you of what Pastor Martin Niemöller said. First, they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Finally, they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out. Well, let's flip that slightly. First, you want Prince Andrew to be stripped of his title because, why? Because he was accused by a woman who asserts that she was paid $15,000 to sleep with him the first time and $400 to sleep with him the second time, and I forget what amount the third time. I know what I call that, and I call it by its proper name. She is at the moment being sued in the American courts for having interfered with I'm trying to be polite here since this is YouTube. Well, she is being sued for gross misconduct. Prince Andrew, even if she is speaking the truth and his memory is defective, he committed no crime. There is nothing wrong legally in this country or in New York State with a 40-year-old good-looking man who's one of the most eligible bachelors on earth sleeping with a 17-year-old prostitute. No law against it. And if every man who availed himself of a prostitute was stripped of all of his rights, I'm afraid you'd find an awful lot of people walking around with very little rights. However, by her own admission, Prince Andrew didn't know she was a prostitute. He didn't know she was being paid by Epstein. He, according to her, thought she liked him, not once, but 3 times. That's her story. Where's his offense? Good-looking guy? How do you know he wasn't a little bit in love with her, according to her story? She certainly didn't let on that she didn't like it and didn't want it. Where is the offense? There is no offense. I wish people would get off that poor man's back. Find another hobby horse to jump on, and let's have moral outrage on behalf of the innocent, not the guilty. And for what it's worth, Prince Andrew is innocent of all crimes and charges. Anybody who's guilty of anything, of any crime, it's his accuser. And has anybody stripped Bill Clinton or mooted stripping him of the honorific of president when he was a far closer friend of Epstein? Excuse me, since when did lack of proportion become a valid reason to destroy an innocent man's life. And he is innocent. He may be guilty of being a buffoon, and he may be guilty of being obnoxious, but he is innocent of what you are trying to pillory him for. And I don't like it. I have no more to say except that I leave you with one thought. If Parliament can strip a prince of his title when he was convicted of no crime, how soon do you think it will be before that same Parliament strips you of the right to further the opinions you've just furthered in this question? Be careful what you wish for. You might get it. We all need to be mindful of the consequences of our desires and actions. An unbreakable rule of physics is, for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. Cogitate upon that, my dear, before you seek to deprive others of rights which open the door to your own rights being deprived of. Or do you think that because he's a prince he should be deprived of his rights, but you, being an ordinary person, shouldn't be deprived of yours? We can all have civil liberties, or none of us will have them. Civil liberties aren't a convenience to be doled out by a punitive populace and a doctrinaire elite. Thereby lies the road to true oppression and perdition. And to lower the temperature a bit, I'm going to read something from Marcia Sagadore. Regarding the rail strike, why is the union allowed to halt the economy and running of the country, destroying citizens' lives and livelihood? I remember when the air traffic controllers in the US went on strike, which halted transportation in the country. President Reagan immediately fired all of them and replaced them with other non-union workers. He didn't let them hold the country to ransom. Your point is well taken. I lived in France on and off for 14 years, and I'm here to tell you, the country is a total mess. Every week there is a strike. The three favorite words of the French are attendre, which is wait, control, which is control, and grève, which is strike. We do not want to return to the bad old days of trades unions grinding this country to a halt because they want to seize power on behalf of a small working class elite. The dictatorship of the proletariat. That's what they are aiming for. I don't want a dictatorship of royalty, aristocracy, bourgeoisie, or proletariat. You know, we as a society need to decide between our responsibility to self and to others. And the indulgence of self at the expense of others is anti-social. Democracy has given us many hard-won rights, such as the right to strike, which was a good right when workers were being oppressed, but is now being misused by unions to enhance their power to the detriment of the interests of the country and the well-being of the citizens of the country. We need new laws to crack the power of segments of the population which are holding society generally to ransom. This is an issue that needs to be resolved and will hopefully be resolved. And in the meantime, the government should pass laws making it possible to circumvent those, a handful of people, who wish to deprive everybody else of their rights, because we also have rights. And there is no way this strike is justifiable. It is immoral. As simple as that. And on that note, I will say thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been of some interest to you. Sorry that some of it had to get heavy, but you know, levity is not everything in life. Gravitas counts for something too. The pull of gravity keeping us earthed. So, if you have enjoyed this, please like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and keep the questions and comments coming in, please. Remember, this cannot be done without you. God bless and goodbye.